Good morning. Welcome to Books at the Bottom of the Stairs. My name's Lorraine. I've been trying to figure out how to get, eye contact with you guys because I flipped the camera around. Like you can do that thing where it's like looking away from you or looking towards you. I guess that's the selfie view. Anyways, if I sort of look right around there, I think I have eye contact. And if I don't, I apologize. Right, so talking about books. Today is really humid. It's alternating between high humidity and pouring rain outside. And we're supposed to be going with friends up to a place, if you know Nova Scotia at all, Halifax is on one side of a kind of pill-shaped province, I guess, and kind of where these guys are is where we're headed. And it's outside of a small town called Canning, and sorry guys, and it is a place called Two Planks and a Passion, and we're going to see a play outside. I must take the camera with me and see if I can add some photos on at the end because the view is astonishing. So they've got these bleachers that overlook a small little field and then a deep plunge, and off in the distance is a big mountainscape. And quite often what happens is as we're watching whatever the play is, we're getting a bit of a sunset, but I think almost every year we have seen eagles fly by, or there's been I think one year there was a dog barking off on a farm way in the distance, and it was perfect. It was when people were looking for some missing person in the play. It was perfect timing. Anyways, it's fabulous, and in years past we have stayed for the second play. Usually we have a picnic lunch that the theater provides, and then once it's dark, we go up a different hill and into a little grove of trees, and by firelight we watch things like Macbeth or Frankenstein, and each year it's been kind of a spooky play, and they generally do sort of Joan of Arc was amazing, and it was a musical, and the woman who played the role of Joan was portraying it as a farm girl who was kind of a tomboy because she had to do all the chores and everything. Anyways, it's really great, but for whatever reason this year we decided to just go see the first part. So I wasn't going to tape today because we were supposed to leave about now, but we're hoping to leave in such a way that it's not raining when we get there. And they do have an indoor theater, so if it's still raining we can go and see, but it's really wonderful to just do it out on the bleachers. So that's my plan. What's that got to do with the kitchen and the books? Nothing. So I have several books that I've enjoyed and one that I really didn't. I'm going to start with the book that I really didn't. Over the course of last year, I believe, as I was watching different channels, different recommendations came up for The Vanishing Half by Bennett. Sorry, it's a bit too close. It's a big book. Quite often people said, oh, it's like Passing by, is it Nella Lansing who wrote that? I'll fix that in the doobly-doo below. But this one is supposed to be a more modern take on it. Sort of 1960s, I guess. Well, anyhow, everybody raved about it and compared it to Passing. Now, I really enjoyed Passing. It was shorter. I'm pretty sure it was, just slightly over 100 pages. And that was written in an earlier period. And what was it about? It was about... I won't tell you what Passing's about because we're here to talk about the Winn sisters, who were identical twins, but very, very light-colored. And the two girls end up living in New Orleans, and one of them continues to spend her life as a black woman, but in rebellion against her family and her town, she ends up marrying a very dark man. And their child is equally dark. And the families and friends back where she used to live, their goal is to get as light as possible. Now this other sister, Stella has decided that she is going to pass as white because she's had a couple of experiences where passing as white is just a lot, it's not simpler, but it yields better results, let's say. So she ends up marrying a man who has absolutely no idea that this is her history. And she has a daughter as well. Okay, that's the basic plot. There's not a ton that seems to happen except the question of discovery. Will Stella be discovered? Will her sister, was it Daphne, find her? And then the daughter, the daughter's name, was it Reese? You know what? I can't remember. That's the point of this book. Desiree was the other sister's name, and I can't remember the name of the daughter. It's in 3, possibly 4 sections. I did not finish. I gave it a good go. But when I got to Stella's section, we had already read Desiree's section and the daughter's section, and by the time we came to Stella, I thought, they are interchangeable. The storylines are quite different, and the conundrums that the different people undergo are quite different. But the tone of the book was so monotonous. So monotonous. And I couldn't tell one woman from another. They had no difference in voice. They had no difference in description around them in terms of, they were living very different lives. One's in a small cottage living pretty close to the elbow of poverty, and the other woman is living in a extremely well-to-do neighborhood. And the daughter goes off to university in California and is starting to live a student life, which is entirely another thing. You wouldn't know. I mean, the only thing these women had in common was their familyness. And I mean, they didn't even really respond to that. No, that's not true. The author only told us what their responses were. They only told us what the reactions were. There was very little, I don't know how to explain it. When voice, I think it's in the question of voice. The voices weren't different. The dialogue's different, and you get slightly different intonations between the characters, but it was just not substantive. I thought they were entirely interchangeable. I think if this book had been significantly shorter and maybe told with a lot more tension and a lot more anxiety about whether Stella's life is going to be revealed or not, I maybe then it would have been a better book. But I don't even want to give this book a 1, and I know there are people out there who just don't like when that happens. But I guess 1, 0, and DNF are all kind of the same, aren't they? I'm not sure what intrigued other readers. I truly am not sure at all. And so this might be a good book for other people, but it was a complete yawn for me. Sorry, I'm restless. I'm in a chair that's not 100% comfortable. So, you got to see my stomach. All right. The Marlow Murder Club by Robert Thorogood was amusing. We've got a 70-year-old woman, Judith, who is out swimming in the Thames. She's got a house that floats, grounds go down to the water of the Thames, and she hears a gunshot, and she's pretty sure that her neighbor has been shot, and she calls the police, and there's no activity to speak of. They're not interested. And as time goes by, we end up with multiple murders, and she's pretty sure who committed the murder, but is she right? Because as each subsequent murder comes along, we've got more not confusing, but we've got more details, and there doesn't seem to be a connection between murder 1 and murder 2. But she's convinced that it's the same murderer. Yet murder number 3, he couldn't have done it. And the person who might have possibly done murder number 2 couldn't have done murder number 3. So how is this working? So is there a serial killer? Isn't there a serial killer? There's some kind of ties between them. Anyway, it was fun. I really enjoyed it. It has been recommended as a follow-up to the Thursday Night Murder Club. I think it's quite different. I think we've got an elderly woman who is extremely smart and observant, and she also comes across 2 other women who have different strengths and quite different in temperament and in skill sets, and so they each bring something new to the exploration. I think that's about the end of the similarities. The murder is completely different. The skill sets are completely different of the compared to the other book. And I really enjoyed it because the entire way along, I just really wasn't sure what was going on. At no point was I 100% sure who could have done it. And then I made up my mind that it was someone that no one was investigating. And then, well, that didn't make any sense because that person wasn't worth investigating. So I was entirely wrong the entire way through. I really enjoyed it. He has a couple of others that I think I will pursue finding. A Meditation on Murder, The Killing of Polly Carter, Death Knocks Twice, and Murder in the Caribbean. And I have not done the research. I presume they are all different scenarios and different investigators. I don't know. We'll find out. All right, I did do a follow through on Kevin Henkes because I had really enjoyed him when I spoke of him last in a previous video. And so I thought, well, you know, it's summer and these are going to be small books, and that means that in the summer I read quite a lot and I'll be able to get through these quickly. And I really enjoyed them. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail about each book, but I am going to just say that the author, Kevin Henkes, I really enjoyed. He's got a very nice track record here for middle readers, and each one investigates some kind of dilemma within a family. There's divorce, or there's the death of, is it a grandmother? Yes, it's a grandmother. So we've got Sweeping the Heart, Blood Lake Moon, which was my third favorite of the three, and Sun and Spoon. Now, this one was really sweet. This one was about a grandma who had passed away and how the young boy was trying to come to terms with remembering her, and also grandpa's grief and just the sort of family awkwardness that happens when a significant family member dies, and, you know, just, what's the word, like recalibrating, realigning themselves around that empty hole. So that was that one. Loved it the most. And Sweeping the Heart is about one young girl who is a clay artist. She's been working with clay forever and is making all these, I don't know if you can see that, it's kind of a weird, they're bunnies. So she's being given the opportunity to do a gallery exhibition, and so she's making these bunnies in clay, which is what's, and her mom passed away when she was 2, so she doesn't even remember her. And along comes a young boy who is the nephew of the clay galleries, and his parents are about to go through divorce. And he's protesting every way he can think of. He bought a bunch of t-shirts, and he's got things like children of divorce are more frequently dropouts than not, or, you know, something like that. And so he keeps wearing these t-shirts that are showing his parents the statistics on the results of children from divorced families. So he's going to stay with his aunt, while they figure out whether they really are going to go ahead with this divorce or not. Blood Lake Moon, I didn't like as much. It's 2 young lads who come together at a lake in the summer for less than a week, and the one boy's, Mitch's parents are going to get a divorce, so he's kind of in shock because he's the last to find out. And the other young boy, they're coming back to a family home where his brother had died many years ago, so they're trying to reconcile themselves as to whether they want to continue owning that property or not. That one, not as much. Now, these are all the books that I can get at the library, but there are others, so I think I'll just kind of keep my eyes open at you know, rummage sales, or looking for things at Value Village or something like that. So 2 nonfiction books. This one, I'm going to talk about it now. It's for my Quaker book club, The Salt Path by Raynor Winn. It was the Costa Book Awards shortlist winner. Well, I'm sorry, not a winner because it was on the shortlist. So anyhow, The Salt Path is the story of Raynor and her husband Moth. And through story that we do not entirely, we get some picture of what's happened, but they lose their farm in Wales and are essentially homeless, and decide that they are going to do the 630-mile southwest coast path from Somerset to Dorset via Devon and Cornwall. And Moth has been diagnosed with a progressive degenerative disease. The map is not particularly illustrative of much. And so Moth is not doing well. Part of what his degenerative disease has is the muscles kind of lose elasticity, and so he's kind of progressively cramping up. There are other things, but I think that's the most essential point. But it turns out that the more he walks, the more his muscles kind of loosen up. They end up having this journey more down. They get down to the point and then a little bit back, but then winter sets in, and a friend rescues them for the winter in exchange for them doing work in a cottage that she's renovating. And so they think they've got sort of a home setting, but not really, because they're just doing it for food and shelter. And she goes off to get a job that's pretty mind-blowingly physically difficult, and then they continue on with finishing the trail. I mean, that's basically the storyline, and along the way they encounter kindness, and then they encounter not kindness. They encounter a lot of hunger. They encounter some beautiful landscapes. I particularly liked how she described the landscape in the first 50% of the journey. I thought as we got along the backside of the coast, maybe the coast is not as pretty, I don't know, or maybe they were just coming to the end of their rope, but it wasn't quite so evocative as the first half. I really liked it. I thought that they had quite a lot of courage taking on this in the face of what they were encountering. They had to do it with virtually no money. It certainly meets the conditions of the Quaker theory of simplicity, because what they had was what they carried on their back, and what they ate was what they could afford that day, and some days were pretty hungry days. And speaking of which, I couldn't believe their decisions around food. I was going mental thinking, why are you buying that? I mean, for the same amount of money, if you bought some eggs and some apples, yes, they're heavier, but nutrition, energy, he's sick, do a better diet. Soup kitchens, I don't know. I just, very annoyed with them on terms of their food, but everything else I really enjoyed. And I think there's quite a lot in there around, especially if you're coming to, like I am, sort of midpoint of a marriage. We've been married for over 30 years. No reason why we're going to stop at this point, but it's good to do a check-in just to make sure you're both still on the same page. And that's kind of what they're confronting along the way, is just they have a solid marriage, but how is it going to go forward in the face of these traumas and these big hurdles? And sometimes it's easy, you know, to, like in our life, there are no hurdles right at the moment, thank you. But if your marriage or your partnership or your friendships are on a good, steady, rock solid base, then hurdles and traumas are more likely to be survived and you know, overcome. So this is part of what their discussion is. And we got a picture of Moth, but I didn't hear his voice quite as much as I would have liked. And so that was maybe, as I'm talking now, I'm thinking, yeah, that was maybe my other caveat. I would have liked to have heard Moth's point of view a few more times. And that's spelled M-O-T-H, like the, you know, like the moth. Yeah, that was a good book. And the last book I'm going to talk about is a local history book. And I was just, you know, I've been kind of thinking to myself, Share and Care, The Story of Nova Scotia Home for Colored Children, Charles R. Saunders, by Nimbus Publishing, which is a local press. Just been kind of thinking about, you know, in Nonfiction November. So those of you who helped me out with some comments around the Newberry Challenge that wasn't so successful, I'm thinking, what about a local history, local geography kind of challenge for Nonfiction November as sort of a subtext, or should I do something in a completely different month? But I thought nonfiction in November, you know, your local history generally isn't nonfiction. So, yeah, anyways, just rolling around in my head. If you've got any feedback on that, that'd be great. But I know that Nova Scotia has got a huge amount of local history writing. In terms of some of the forts or the harbors or the industry and some of the professional people. Things like, oh, I just forgot what it's called, but up where our camp is, there used to be this big contraption that brought in imaging so that people could get television through the rest of the Atlantic provinces. And it's a really interesting book, and I can't remember what it's called, and I think it had something to do with an underlined cable that came across the ocean. Anyways, yeah, Nova Scotia's got some pretty cool stuff that's going on. I think also there's been quite an out thrusting of Black history literature, both fiction and nonfiction. So yeah, anyways, that was just kind of what was trolling through my mind, and trolling in a good way, like fishing. All right, so Share and Care, really good book. The children's, the Home for Children, Colored Children, did not come about until way too late. I think it was well in the 1880s that they were finally able to get some kind of a facility, and there have been Black families in Nova Scotia. Oh, there it is. Do you want to see it? Let me see if I can get it. That's my bird clock. Lunchtime. Yes. What is that? Great, that's the owl. When the owl hoots, let's see. And we had a cat, I don't know if I told you guys, when the cardinal sang at 3 o'clock, he knew that my daughter would be coming home from school, and that would mean big hugs as well as treats. So that cat got to know what the different bird calls meant. It was hilarious to see him come charging down the stairs. Okay, and in our house, whenever the owl hoots, then we go, we know, ooh, we get to eat. So, all right. Right, Black families have been a part of Nova Scotia's history pretty much from the beginning, one way or another. Some of them were freed, some of them were enslaved, a lot of them came over with the Loyalists, and then we've got another sort of surge of folks coming up through the American Revolution. There are, of course, people who come across as enslaved folks from their British owners, which is it's primarily what Nova Scotia is a British colony, of course. I shouldn't laugh. Not everybody knows that, and I forget sometimes where we come from too. Okay, why is that important? Okay, so for about 200 years, there was no facility for any children who were orphaned or of unfortunate birth problems, and so these kids were just more or less abandoned on their communities, and there was not a lot of care given to these kids. So there was an idea originally that this home for colored children was going to be more than just a holding place for them. There was going to be an educational component, and that this was something that children could graduate through the different levels of education right on up to apprenticeshipping or being educated enough to be maybe not a lawyer or a doctor, but perhaps a teacher or an accountant. So they had real aspirations. And as time went by, of course, funding is always the big bugaboo, but eventually they got this really rock-solid home together. Now, there's been quite a lot of discussion over time about orphanages and so forth and the horrors there, but based on this book and based on absolutely no kind of outcry since the publishing of this book, and the fact that this was a model for quite a lot of other places, including Boston, for how to create a home for children of any color. This was a really, really superlative orphanage, as far as I can understand. So anyhow, that was an interesting book, and I'm reading it because I have a little book that I'm writing for mill children, and one of the characters is a Black orphan, and I made an assumption in my writing that, of course, you know, any kind of orphanage would, especially for colored children, would be just a hellhole. So I'm glad I read this because it's going to correct me. But also, isn't it, if it's true, you know, I'm crossing my fingers it's true. Isn't it nice that perhaps there were people out there that cared enough to make it a more than nice experience for these kids that had lost family, or whose family was unable to look after as many children, or, you know, just situations like that. That's it for me. The rain is slowing down a little bit, and I know that let me see, when the Kingfisher pips, we're going to get in the car and go off to the mountains and watch play. I hope that your day is nice and dry, and that you're not in the middle of a heat wave or anything else torturous, and that all your reading dreams and adventures continue to come true. I'll see you next week. Bye-bye.